Live again. I should make sure that my tabs are muted so that I don't echo myself. Okay, looks like we're okay. Should have done that before I went live. I hope today goes better. Man, Stream Elements is still doing things it shouldn't be doing. So yeah, I tested the stream for an hour before this stream, and I didn't have a single dropout. I have no idea why that happened. Like, might have been as many as 10 times yesterday, but that was not the start I wanted. But it looks like the VOD turned out okay on YouTube, so even if we have more dropouts today, then at least it'll turn out okay on the other side. But if you're watching this and the connection drops and the screen goes black, just try refreshing your page and hopefully you'll see me again. Or maybe my internet will actually die and the stream will just be over. But hopefully we're okay. I chose a specific server this time instead of just letting Restream figure it out. I can't really test the Restream setup to both Twitch and YouTube because Restream doesn't let you do a bandwidth test through Twitch. I can do a bandwidth test, a bandwidth test directly to Twitch, but I can't do that through Restream. So if Restream is the problem, I can't really verify that. I'm only left to come to that conclusion if the stream only drops out when I'm using Restream. Hopefully that made sense. Hey Missy, hey Devil, thanks for stopping in. I'm going to go ahead and jump into this because time's of the essence, and I wanted to get through Casey's Q&A of day 26 before today's stream. I wanted to do that yesterday, but I wound up not having time, partially because I just kept on getting sidetracked, and also my internet dropping out and, you know, just disrupting the flow of the stream didn't help matters either. So we're just gonna get through this Q&A, and you know, I would skip the Q&As, except sometimes Casey will work on the code during the Q&A, and sometimes the Q&A is just interesting enough on its own that I'm not gonna try and like pan through to see where he's making code changes and then just skip through that. That just seems like it's gonna be more trouble than it's worth. So I'm just gonna listen to these Q&As, and if I have something that I think is interesting to say to add to what he's saying, I will. But again, for the next like hour and a half or so of the series, I think it's just a lot of Casey laying down, you know, the general trajectory of where he thinks things are going to go for the game architecture. So let's see what he has to say.
Previous streams, and put C Muratori in the questions so that I can see it, because I've got a little thing that basically says, you know, that filters questions for me based on whether or not my name is in them. This diagram basically in a little more detail of just how we're going to try to approach things, and then we'll sort of dive into doing code on this sort of stuff. All right, that brings us to question time. Please, if you could, keep your questions to things that we covered in today's stream or in previous streams, and put C Muratori in the questions so that I can see it, because I've got a little thing that basically says, you know, that filters questions for me based on whether or not my name is in them, so I won't see it if you Okay, let's see. Let us see. Questions. Does anybody have them? If there's no questions, we all go home early tonight. Remember, it's not Handmade Hero with the app, it's C Muratori. Handmade Hero I won't see. Although, you know what, I should just start scanning for that as well. Seems like I should. I'm gonna write a note of that. Is immediate mode routine mode like IOC dependency injection? Inversion of control dependency injection? I'm afraid I'm not familiar with those terms, so I could not tell you. The one
Did I just get a dependency injection mentioned?
so I could not control dependency injection. I'm afraid I'm not. Inversion of control dependency injection. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with those terms.
So I know what dependency injection is, but inversion of control added to the front of that, I have no idea what the hell that's supposed to make, or what's that supposed to mean. Casey is quiet. Why is he quiet? I haven't changed anything since yesterday. That's weird. I'm just going to bump him up a little bit here. Well, actually, yeah, I'll just bump him up over here, and you guys tell me. I don't know why that's happening, because it looks like he's right at the same volume he was at yesterday. Why would anything be different? I didn't change anything. All of a sudden he's quiet now. Just keep me updated. Let me know if he's still too quiet. I wonder if, so what happened there was the game, or not the game, the video reloaded itself in the middle of playing it, and that's when I was like, oh, great. I forgot to let because when a YouTube video popped out has been just idle for a long time, it has to like reload itself once you start playing it again. Sounds like you're hearing him from my headphone mic. That doesn't make any sense to me. No, you're right. So he's not playing at all through my desktop audio. Why? Why is that happening? So much effort just to watch a video. Let me see if I can figure this out. Like, great, now my stream's working. But I have no audio. This is great. I love it when things don't work. What the fuck, dude? Why can't I catch a break? Is it because I turned OBS down? That's probably what it is. Okay, I think I did change something and screw myself. I didn't realize that. Okay, let me just verify that this is correct. Let me verify that my theory is right. How about now?
Write a game that runs.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so it was my fault. I am to blame. It's on me. Forgive me. But basically what happened is I didn't want to hear Windows playing any more sounds, so I turned down OBS thinking that's going to stop OBS from playing system sounds to you, and then I turned system, and then I saw the system sounds volume meter, and I turned that off. That's actually what's going to turn off the why can't my brain just do what I want it to do? Why can't my mouth do what my brain wants it to do? I didn't turn the OBS volume meter back on, and so that's why you could not hear Casey, because I guess basically OBS turns all of the desktop sounds into its own audio meter, and then it starts playing that up. But we're good now. I think we're okay.
Whether or not.
I also rewound this because it sounds like you guys missed a bunch of what he was saying there.
My name is in them, so I won't see it if you don't. Okay, let's see. Let us see. Questions. Does anybody have them? If there's no questions, we all go home early tonight. Remember, it's not Handmade Hero with the @ it's Casey Muratori. Handmade Hero I won't see. Although, you know what? I should just start scanning for that as well. I suppose I should. I'm going to make a note of that. All right. Is immediate mode retain mode like IOC dependency injection? Inversion of control dependency injection? I'm afraid I'm not familiar with those terms, so I could not tell you.
So I don't think you guys had audio for that. What did he say? Inversion control dependency injection. I have an understanding of what this person might mean by saying dependency injection. It's when you have some kind of dependency, right? And you have some other code that you need to write that's going to use that dependency, and then you just give that dependency over to the code, and then the code can, so like, at least in my head, what a good example of this would be is, say you need to interact, say like you want to talk to the Twitch API and you want to say, hey Twitch, give me how many viewers are watching this stream, or whatever it is, but you want some other code to be able to use that information coming from Twitch. You just give that code the Twitch client, and then it can query Twitch for data as needed, and then you can do whatever you want with that data using that client, and you're passing the client around. In version control, I don't know exactly what they mean by that.
The one qualm I still have with the fixed time step style update render we're using is that I don't understand how it reacts to missing its target frame rate. What if the end user machine is slow enough that we miss 30, 60 or 30 FPS? Can we build in safeguards about that? So no. Basically, if you can't run at 30 frames a second, you shouldn't be running a game. Because anything less than 30 frames a second will look choppy. So you shouldn't do that, ever. Never write a game that runs at less than 30 frames a second unless you are intentionally doing some kind of strategy game that just doesn't care, I guess. And the way I would say that was, if we were going to plan on running at sub 30, we would at the very least still run the game at 30. We'd have the renderer in like a separate thread or something that would update the graphical bitmap only every other frame or something like that. But you never, ever, 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 ever want to actually run the input at less than 30 for sure. But I would argue you never want to run the graphics at less than 30 either. What I would point out, though, is we're not architecting the game around a fixed time step. The time step will take the T. So our game can actually run at any frame rate. Just to be clear, the game architecture runs at any frame rate. Because if you're going to pass in a T to update the game with. So you would be able to run the game at 50 frames a second, just don't. If that makes sense. And if it's graphical quality that is causing you to not hit 30, what you want to do is you want to scale back the graphics so that you do hit 30. If that makes sense. Are you going to work with virtual file systems to store data?
FPS supremacy, indeed. I remember having nothing more than like a $200 or $300 laptop, something like that, that I got as a birthday present one year, and I immediately went and downloaded Counter-Strike on that laptop, and it couldn't run Counter-Strike at more than like 25 FPS. And I just remember it being so agonizing, because you're playing against other people and they have, you know, PC gaming rigs that can run Counter-Strike at 120 FPS or whatever. But it didn't matter, just because I had so much fun playing that game that I just enjoyed 25 FPS for what it was. But now that I know what it's like to play a game at 120 FPS, miss me with that shit. I will never play a game under 30 FPS, at least a shooter. I mean, if it's like a, you know, some kind of 2D side-scrolling thing, it doesn't matter as much. But if it's an FPS game, there's just no way.
Resources. Well, I mean, sort of. The phrase virtual file system is really a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. Like, almost no games ship with virtual file systems. A file system is a very like specific thing that has a bunch of capabilities. Usually what people do is they just essentially have a zip file. You know, they have like a pack, like where they pack things end to end. But that's not really a file system. I understand your argument for blending update and render for particles. In general, don't you want many things to update before rendering, though? For example, if we update and render the player, only to later update the bullet and find it hits the player's reaction animation is a frame off. So I think I would caution against thinking about updating in that way, because you've basically baked into that question the assumption that the way that you update things like bullets and players is that you loop through a set of entities and whoever happens to be first in the list gets updated first or something. That's usually not a very good way to write your update loop. I realize that is the way a lot of games write their update loop, but I would never do it that way. So when we get to sort of how we write those things, I'll show you how to structure things so that we update things correctly. Because the other way to, I would point out that in that situation you talked about, you actually have another bug, which is that what if you were to, what if you were to update the player, right? And then you update the bullet, and you find out that the thing that had happened with the bullet should imply that the player couldn't have moved to where they were going to move. Like, the bullet hits a button that opens a door, and the player hit the door when they were updated. So at that point, when the player would have been going through the door, they actually stopped, which is a bug, right? So you can't just think about things even in terms of update and render. You have update dependencies in general, and update dependencies have to be handled. It usually has nothing to do with rendering or not. So if you have things that are dependent on their order of resolution and you care, those have to be baked into the update understanding itself. And it really doesn't have much to do with rendering, and you could leave rendering out of it entirely and you still have that problem.
What he's talking about, like this order of events affecting entities in a game and how you change, you know, one entity hits another entity, but that second entity was in the middle of hitting another entity. Being able to reason about that sort of thing is why, being able to reason about that sort of thing easily is why I've taken to a more procedural approach over time, just more and more. it just becomes a lot easier to untangle things when you can just go, this happens, this happens, this happens. It's just a step-by-step list of instructions of what's going to happen. Digging the beard and long hair combo. Yeah, it works for me. You know, this is the easiest way to be a dad because now I don't have to worry so much about maintenance. At least, like, I just recently trimmed the beard, but I haven't cut my hair in like a year, and it just works. Chelsea likes it. It's working out for me. And then I don't have to carve off half an hour to go get a haircut every few weeks or whatever, or make Chelsea cut my hair. Lord knows that she has enough things to deal with. So it just makes it easier on everybody when I just go full, you know, caveman.
How strong is the notion that you perform the update and render steps together? What about a situation where update order requirements differ from render order requirements? Well, so the idea is not that it's a strong division. The idea is, I'm sorry, that it's a strong blending. The idea is that architecturally you don't make the distinction. So you don't want to pre-say a priori that update and render can't happen together. And so that way anything who can be updated and rendered correctly together will be, and anything that can't won't be, right? But there's a great many things that can be, and so not making an architectural division there helps you increase performance. Let's see. Okay, so Jonathan Blow is asking to explain the variable in this session. And one of the things that I didn't talk about when we talked about game architecture, obviously, was where the variable fits into all of this. The reason that I didn't do that is because still, I mean, I've been programming games for like 30 years now, I guess. I mean, you know, I was little when I started, so I don't know, 20 years professionally. I've never actually seen a game engine successfully create a variable for more than, like, you know, a fraction of a second. So we really just have not been able to study these variables, if they even really exist. I mean, we only see them indirectly, right? So again, Jonathan, it's a good question, obviously, but I feel like it's impossible to really explain. It's like a frontier of computer science. How do you handle update versus render for a game that can run at 60 or 120 FPS depending on the user's display? Well, it doesn't really matter. I guess there's some. If you are concerned about wanting the game to always run at the same time step, even if the rendering is happening at a different time step, then that's a sort of separate question. But assuming you just mean 60 or 120 FPS, it's just this t variable, right? Either the t variable comes in as 1 over 60 as the amount to update, or 1 over 120. That's the only difference between the two scenarios you just described. So you don't really have to change anything. When you say you like to do update render together, are you implying that you do it on a per object entity basis? No, you do it at whatever granularity makes sense for the system. So like for particle systems, for example, you would do it for the particle system at once. For objects, there may be a dependency graph that has to get traversed for the update. You never know. So it's about not drawing an architectural distinction so that every portion of the update code can choose to have the rendering bound in or happen later, depending on which one it wants. Are we planning on networking with the game loop? Well, we may do networking as a separate stream someday after the game is done. But no, we're not going to do networking because networking is a whole separate topic that I don't feel like we'll really have time to do within any reasonable sort of size of this stream. How are you going to handle shaders in Handmade Hero? Well, we will cover shaders when we get to shaders. Let's see. What language are you using primarily? Is there somewhere we can view these streams? We are using C with a little bit of C++. And yes, if you go to handmadehero.org, you can go to...
It's a little sad that he took the Handmade Hero website down, because now you can't actually do that. Up until a couple of weeks ago, you could actually go and you could still look at everything on the website. But I think it just redirects to his company's website now.
A number of places. There's a video archive, which is the direct YouTube archive for all the things. And you can also go to this news and forums link, which has for some, it lags a bit because people actually manually do this work, and there's a lot of work. But on the episode guide here, if you click on news and forums and episode guide, these are annotated ones where you can actually see stuff like timelines of what was covered. So if you should check here first if you're trying to catch up with older episodes, because these have a lot more information in them than just viewing it directly on the YouTube. But if you're trying to look at one that just got posted, they aren't quite in the episode archive yet. So. Would a memory mapped virtual file system be a BAS move them? I have no idea what that means. Sorry, I do not know. Oh, bad. Would be a bad move. Well, memory mapped virtual file systems have some problems. The first thing that there's a problem is you can't run on 32-bit. Because if you have more than 4 gigs of audio-visual data and you want to run on a 32-bit system, well, you can't memory map the file, right? So you'd have to memory map the file in chunks, and if you're memory mapping the file in chunks, you might as well just load it, right, with traditional loading code. So memory map virtual file system, I don't know. I mean, on 64-bit memory mapping, I don't know if I like it. You don't have control over when the operating system's doing that paging, so I don't know. I don't love memory map files, to be honest with you. I like them for certain things. We use them in the recording. For certain things, they make sense when you actually have something that's basically memory backed by file. But in this case, that's not exactly what we have because we never write to it even. So it's a little unnecessary, and you lose a little control of when the operating system goes to do the actual reads.
I actually tried to figure out how to do memory mapped files in Odin, the language that I'm using while working through this series now, and it just didn't work out. I kind of like faked it. I allocated the memory to this object that would then be written out to a file, and it just created another step that was unnecessary, and then it just took longer to do the recording. And I'll show it off once we get to the end of this Q&A here. I was able to fix that bug. I spent some time this morning working on that bug from yesterday. Turns out I made a silly mistake, but we'll get into it later.
Will Handmade go with a loading screen or streaming method read resources? Streaming. So definitely not loading screen. Can you go over how streaming fits into the GWAR? Yeah, so basically what will happen here, and we'll see this in a second, but what will happen on the diagram is very much like what I've drawn here. We will be inside GWAR, right? And I talked about this way back when I talked about the platform layer at the very beginning. And if you remember, I talked about that we implemented like a debug load file, debug save file thing that we have in there for now, and that's what we'll be using to load assets just to start with. But when we go to actually do our streaming, what will happen is basically there will be a queue exposed. So when the GWAR calls in, it's not passing one currently. It'll pass a queue in here that the game can write to that basically will allow a threaded resource loader in the background to load things for the game. So a queue will come in here and it'll do writes to that queue. That is how it will that's how it will kind of come in on GWAR. Game engines often run update and render prep in separate threads in order to exploit hardware parallelism. If you combine update and render, will that prevent you from doing this? No, and often that is not a very good way to split those two things, actually, because of the cache coherency problem I just mentioned. So if you imagine, I mean, it depends. In streaming scenarios, maybe it doesn't matter, so I shouldn't say it's, I overspoke. I wouldn't say it was bad. I'll simply say that it's not relevant in terms of performance. The reason why is because if I want to, right, if I have something where I've got a bunch of stuff that has to get updated, right, I can choose to split it either way. I can either say, like, each one of these things has to get updated and rendered, right? So I've essentially got, object 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever they are, particles, who cares, right? So I've got update and render. If I choose to do, when I choose to do my threading, I can do that in one of two ways. I can do it using one of these vertical lines here. And you could almost imagine it's not update and render. You could imagine this was any number of tasks, right? You've got, you can think of it like a matrix. Let me just draw this out for you. I think it's pretty important to understand. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw it. Okay. So you got your code, right? And you wrote it single-threaded. So you just wrote it, you got it working, right? Now you want to think about it in terms of how do you get threading performance out of this code, right? So here are the elements. So I have element 0, element 1, element 2, element 3, and these can be whatever they are, right? They're objects, they're particles, I don't care what. You then have steps. There's step 0, step 1, step 2, and so on, right? So all of these sorts of things, each one of these boxes has to happen. In single-threaded code, you can think of traversing the matrix like this, right? I start with element 0, I do step 0, I do step 1, I do step 2. I go to element 1, I do step 0, I do step 1, I do step 2, right? Whatever those steps are. And these steps, maybe it's just update and render, so there's only 2. Maybe it's update, render, and write to disk. I mean, I don't know. Who knows, right? Whatever it is, I've got 3 steps here. Update, frobnicate, because that happens. Obviously, everyone frobnicates things once in a while, and then render. So I've got steps that can be split up, right? So one way is that zigzag pattern. That's the single-threaded way, and that's obviously the slowest way because you're not taking advantage of any of the cores of the processor. But sometimes that's the best way to do it because if you have lots of things, other things that could be going on at the same time, there may be no reason to write something multi-threaded. So obviously you always want to think about first whether there's even a reason in your particular game, given in your target platform profiles and stuff, whether you even need to. But this is single-threaded, right? That's how that looks. Then if you multi-thread the way you were suggesting, where you say you split them into 2 parts, that looks like this, right? The threads go in columns here, right? So one thread does the update, one thread does the frobnicate, one thread does the render, right? So there you go. That was the thing that you were suggesting. Well, I don't think that's a particularly compelling way to do it. One, because we know there's a dependency here, right? So now I have to have job control understand that this update has to happen before this frobnicate, which means that I can't even actually run them together like you were suggesting. They can't actually be parallelized because the updates have to happen before the frobnicates happen, and the renders have to happen before after the frobnicate. So job control is actually going to have to serialize these things to a large extent, which doesn't sound particularly good to me, right? So that's bad. The other thing that's bad is it pulls it into the cache multiple times. So whatever element 0's data was, any data that might have been shared between these two things now has to get pulled in by each thread. So it's going to get pulled in twice, right? Or 3 times, potentially. Furthermore, if update produces any residuals that frobnicate needed, right? Like let's say it computed something that Frobnicate also would need to compute. Well, either it writes it out to element, which now burns a write because it would have just been on the stack, or it has to be recomputed in Frobnicate, which wastes a bunch of cycles, right? So I don't love, sometimes that's appropriate, but I don't really love doing it that way. What I would prefer to do is break it up this way, right? So basically, there's somebody doing one zigzag that way, and then somebody doing a zigzag this way, right? Basically, break it up by rows, right? Because this way, the dependency is inside the code still, and it looks exactly like the single-threaded code looked, right? But now you just break it up by which one is, by what group of elements it's actually working on. So I don't know. So personally, I tend to prefer writing it that way if you can. If for some reason you have to write it this way, well, okay. But I feel like a lot of times it's better to write it the other way. Since the human eye can only see at 70 frames per second, is it worth it to put in a max FPS allowed? Well, we will put in a max FPS, but not because of that reason. We'll be putting in a max FPS because at some point our floating point values will break down, and so we need to make sure that our time step it doesn't get any smaller than whatever that is. But I would point out that the human eye can actually see greater than 70 frames per second. It can see at least 90. So, I wouldn't go so far as to say that 70 frames per second would be a maximum anyway. But yeah. How are you going to handle VSync? Well, we already kind of do handle VSync in some sense, meaning that we have the code structured so that when we switch to D3 and OpenGL, it'll just kind of work, because we're actually doing our own spin lock there, waiting for the mythical 60th of a second. But what we will do in the future is just actually call D3D or OpenGL, and it will do the VSync on the flip. So our code's already set up to handle it, so we won't really have to do much to make that work. Let's see. For avoiding cache misses when you separate, update, and rendering, can't you store the same types of components together in memory? So for example, you would loop through and update the physics components and then the render components for all entities. Well, no, because they're the same components, right? Whatever physics is creating, right? Physics is going to write, I'm going to do the physics code, right? I have to update the position, the velocity, right, at the very least, so possibly some other things. The position and the velocity are probably needed by the renderer. The position at least is needed to know where to render the thing, right? So I need the position. Velocity is probably needed if I'm doing any kind of motion blur or other sorts of effects. I might need that as well. So they're not separate sets of data. They're the same set of data. Now, there are some things that the physics will use that the rendering won't use, and so yes, that part you don't have to worry about because you're not polluting the cache with that in the case where we're doing like this. But you are definitely wasting cache bandwidth reloading these things. So it's just not as efficient if you can make it work if you can do it this way instead. You said tasks. Does that mean async job system? I don't know if this game will actually need an async job system per se. I think this game is probably going to be scoped such that it doesn't require a full async job system, and the reason for that is because, of course, one of our target platforms, which is the Raspberry Pi, has one core, if I remember correctly. So we really can't go crazy with multi-core. We've got to kind of stick to something reasonable.
Whenever I hear people talk about async, my brain immediately turns off. I have to do some stuff with async await in React, and every time I have to do it, it does the opposite of sparking joy every single time, because I have to think in a way that is so at odds with the way that my brain thinks. I have to be like, okay, that's not gonna return unless I await it, but I'd rather it just be blocking. I'd rather it all just be blocking if possible, and I feel like I made a bunch of other mistakes if I need it to be an asynchronous return, to where if I get to that point where I need to use that, and because of the way some of these frameworks are designed, you really have no choice but to. But it feels like a ton of mistakes led to this place where I have to start thinking about and reasoning about the problems I'm solving in this way. It just feels like a mistake, all of it.
So the things that will multi-thread are mostly going to be like the renderer and stuff that will then use GPU on other platforms and that sort of thing. And asset streaming, which is not really about threading so much as it's about overlapping disk I/O. So let's see, Panda Tipper, when will we see you actually creating the game? Well, we'll start programming the game tomorrow. So I'm not sure what you mean by creating the game, but starting programming the game tomorrow. But we're going to be doing rendering work as well, interleaved. So if you're talking about when will we actually be mostly working on just game code, it'll still be quite a while, because we got to do rendering work interleaved with our game work at the moment, because we haven't written any rendering code yet. Will we be making a physics engine during the series? Yes, but not. It depends what you mean by physics engine. We'll be making an engine that does the physical stuff that we need it to do for this game. But we're not trying to make Havoc or something like this. Since this is a 2D game, it wouldn't be 3D physics anyway. It's 2D physics. That makes sense. Is there any issue with posting a JS HTML5 port on my GitHub? So basically, the way that the code is still copyrighted until eventually we release it into the public domain, which I put a time limit on that. It has to be 2 years from when the game ships or earlier, basically. So you're not supposed to be posting Handmade Hero code to GitHub. If you're just trying to post a ported platform layer that you did, then be my guest, because, hey, you wrote that platform layer, right? And I don't have any interest in stopping you from posting it, because other people can learn from it, and that's been great. So there's been a bunch of people who have posted platform layers. They all asked me for permission, and I said yes to all of them. So I would basically say that posting platform layers is okay. Please send me a note and let me know where it is, because we probably will want to put it on the Handmade Hero site and point to it. But what I would like to avoid is posting the source code to the game anywhere. That's not allowed, primarily because that's like one of the benefits you get for pre-ordering. So that's like part of the product is the source code. So that is not supposed to get posted anywhere, if that makes sense. When things do get released into the public domain, I will make it very clear. So I will be announcing anytime I take a chunk of code and release it into the public domain, because I may release some code earlier into the public domain. I will make it very clear what that is, and the license.txt file in the distribution will change to reflect which files are allowed to be sort of done with what you will.
I'd be very curious to know what he thinks about this now that it's like 10 years since this was made, and how he feels, because it sounds like he wants to replace the series altogether. And again, I still don't know if that means he just wants to wipe it off the face of the internet or not, in which case that kind of kills what my streaming plans were for the time being. But I have a bunch of other ideas of things that I can tackle on stream, which wouldn't be a problem. But I'd just be curious to know what his thoughts are on that now, because I've seen other people post the code on GitHub in various languages and such, and it's public, but it's not like anybody's taking that code, and at least, I mean, I guess I could be wrong. Who knows? Who has the all-seeing eye? I know nobody's Sauron, but as far as I can tell, nobody's taking that code and making a full game out of it. They're just using it as a learning tool, which is really all I want to use it for. I want to learn how to make games on my own, but there's such a depth and a breadth of knowledge in this series that I can take all these bits and pieces out and then put them in my toolbox to then use and go create something completely original. So I'd just be curious to know. Like I said, I tried writing him for permission to even stream what he's doing, because this is all public. His YouTube series, every single one of these episodes is on YouTube. But I didn't know if he thought it would just be, not. I'd be curious to understand where his head is at with this stuff today. Because all I know is that he took the website down. It seems like he's not happy with this material being out there. But I think, and I was going to mention this earlier, I think that it's, despite the fact that it's really dense and there's so much to work through, there's a wealth of knowledge in here. And I also think that he mentions it in the first few days of the series, but he basically says the point of this series is to see me making the mistakes that I would normally make while I'm working on a project, and to think through, the problem solving aspect of like, okay, this isn't working, let's try this instead. And that is truly valuable. And maybe he feels differently about that today, and that's why he's pulling the plug on it a little bit, at least by taking the website down. You still find all the videos on YouTube, again, and you can watch them all and follow them, but and you can still purchase the source code by pre-ordering the game. But yeah, I'm just really curious about what he would say about this, what he says here. I remember him saying something different before, but it turns out he was just talking about the platform layer. So that initial platform code, he's comfortable with people making that public, but he's not comfortable with people making the actual, like, once he gets to this stage and on, he doesn't want that being public, which I think, that's good information to know, because I have a repo up there on GitHub that's public, so I got to private it after this stream.
All right, looks like we are done with questions. Right on time, too, 9:28. All right, thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Handmade Hero for our architecture.
Okay, so he's not going to answer any more questions there. He's just going to go off about plugging the website. So I can have my little show and tell here now. I don't know how big to make the text in my editor. I just know it has to be bigger than I would normally work with it. This is going to be an adjustment for me because this is painfully large, and it means I'm going to be missing a lot of, context in my editor that I would normally have, but you're not going to be able to see it. Obviously, it's hard enough. Casey makes it's still legible when he's writing code on his end, but you would never be able to figure out what is on his editor on mobile. At least you'd have to. I know, like on my iPhone, I can zoom in, but anyway. So yesterday I was trying to get the game to hot reload, and it wasn't working. And I thought it was just like a difference on Windows versus Mac OS. Like there was just something about my build script that was wrong, or maybe I had like backslashes instead of, or I had forward slashes instead of backslashes because of the way Windows paths work. You can see I've got all of these backslashes here, and that's the way it works on Windows, but on like a Unix system, right, there's gonna be, let me see if I can show, I know I've got a path in here somewhere. Yeah, everything is a forward slash inside of the code. So I thought maybe that was throwing something off, but that turned out not to be the case. It turned out that I made a typo when I made a change, and I also made a change without actually verifying it, seemingly, which is weird because normally that's, you make a change and you test it and you make sure that your change did what you thought it did. And I guess I must have run the game and made sure that it was running still, but I didn't actually test the feature that I was changing, which is the hot reloading. So hey Nutella, James coding in this part of the country at this time of year, localized entirely on Twitch. Well, we're on YouTube as well, man. Twitch didn't notify you. Yeah, I don't know what to do. I see more people popping in on the view count too, so I mean maybe Twitch is notifying people late. I have no idea. I can't be bothered to figure all that out. Maybe I should tweet or do something else to notify people, but this has always been a problem. Maybe I should have started a new Twitch channel too, but that is a lot more painful than starting a new YouTube channel because I'm grandfathered in as a partner on Twitch just because I've been on the internet way too long. Got notified from Twitch, but not from YouTube. So yeah, it's different for everybody. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I would say check your notifications, but you can expect me to be live around this time of day every single day during the weekdays. Maybe sometimes on the weekends too, if we don't have anything else going on. But anyway, so I made this change, and I wasn't thinking through it clearly because there was an issue, and I'll just show you right here in the code. If I come down, this definitely looks way too zoomed in. You can't even see. So if we come down here, yeah, this is fine. So what I was trying to do is recompile the game code, right, and then have it hot reload the changes that I was making to the game code while the game was running. And the whole idea is that it makes it really easy to make changes to your game and then see them take effect immediately. So you've got this quick feedback loop where you're always making changes and you're always able to quickly see, did that change do what I wanted it to do, or do I still need to make changes? So it's a productivity boon when you can move fast like that. And at one point, so Casey in this video was just talking about how updating and rendering are generally treated as these separate pieces of the pipeline of drawing a frame, right? Like you take input and you update your game state with that input, and then you go ahead and render the new game state. But he treats update and render, you can see here, as one single call. And it's isolated inside of the game code so that you can make changes to the insides of this procedure and then have that propagate immediately when you reload and recompile the game code. The problem was I was trying to recompile the game code, but I was recompiling. Let me think about this real quick. So when we recompile the game code, the game is using the game code, so it can't actually use the output of the compilation. When the game compiles, it outputs a shared library that the main program is going to use and load in and then start running that new version of the game code. But what the main program was doing, because I made this typo, again, rookie mistake, I had the actual output of the game compiling getting loaded by this procedure call instead of the temporary shared library, because I have to, up here, I copy the original, just doing it exactly the way, everything I'm doing here is exactly the way he's doing it, it's just he's doing it in a totally different language, right? I copy the output of the game compiling, the game code compiles to a shared library, and I copy that into a temporary path that the actual main program can then load. So it was locking the actual output of the game being compiled, and so when I tried to recompile it, it was saying, no, you can't do that. This library is being used by the main program. The other part of the problem was I was doing this stuff up here, which I didn't need to do, which is loading the code. And you could see I had this to do here. Do I still need to store the lib here? Because we load the library, and now we have a handle to the library, and then we say, this is the library that the game code is using. So we add that to this member of the game code struct. And then down here, I'm not actually, I wasn't sure why would I need to do this if this just gives me all of the game code procedures out of the box. See, what was, I made this change here. Originally, I was going one by one. You see it says initialize symbols. I was loading each symbol individually, and then I found out, and I'll plug this guy here. Not that he needs me to plug him, but he's been really helpful as I've been learning the Odin programming language. His name is Carl Zielinski, and he's actually a pro game dev by trade, and he really likes using Odin, so he's been making all of this content. There's his website, and I'm pretty sure his YouTube channel is just his name. So I was in the Odin Discord, and I was talking about code reloading with some of the other people in there, and Carl actually chimed in and showed me that this other procedure exists, so you don't have to load each individual procedure from the game code one at a time. You can just load them all, and as long as the game code struct that you've defined maps to that properly, then you're off to the races. One proc call, and you've got everything that you need in your game code struct to then call later and say, okay, now I'm going to update and render my game. I'm going to get the sound samples, whatever. But the thing that I was missing, along with making this mistake, is that there's a default member of that struct that this procedure handle will then assign this handle to. So it had a completely different name, and this is where the power of reading is so useful. I cannot tell you. If I can go to where I need to go. Why can't I type right? There we go. So over here, if I go into the definition of this procedure, and again, this is zoomed in too far because it keeps going off the page, going off the editor. I can give it the name of the member I want to assign the handle to. But by default, it'll use that. So now when I call it, I give it the name of my member that I want the handle to be assigned to. And I also added this prefix here because this is the way that Casey does it. It's a very common C convention that I only just, it only just hit me recently now that I've been looking at all this games programming stuff, that a lot of C and C++ naming conventions, they prefix the actual procedure with like the library. Like all of these, I'm using SDL to do the platform layer, and all these calls map to, let's see here, if I go, I need like an actual, here we go, open audio device. If I go in here, this actually maps to a binding that calls like SDL underscore open audio device or whatever in C. And Odin is great because it gives me all this for free. and I've been loving it for that reason. It just makes it so easy to go and do really awesome stuff without just having to deal with linking all this stuff and like where do I got to download this library and where do I have to put it and how do I bring all this together. There's no complicated build system. You just write a batch file, and like there's a lot of what writing Odin, it feels like just an even better version of the way Casey is doing things a lot of the times. A lot of things that Casey will complain about, like there's other things syntactically with C that he'll complain about, like the arrow syntax for pointers, and Odin just, will dereference a pointer with the dot syntax instead of using the arrows. Like, there's just all sorts of little niceties like that. Zig actually does that dot syntax for pointers as well. But I'm getting way off track here. I'm just going to peep the chat real quick before I keep going because I know a bunch of you are jumping in here. TikTok is... Okay, hold on. I'm way behind now. Perfect time for me to watch stream after gym and work. Hey, hell yeah, that's what I want. Good for you though, getting in that that workout. Set up a TikTok and promote your streams. I actually, yeah. So okay, now I'm caught up. I do have a TikTok. I don't know exactly how to clip this content. I have ideas for shorts. Like there was a video that I was watching earlier today that like perfectly. It's like weird because that video was just posted by the Primogen like a couple weeks ago or something like that, and it perfectly encapsulates why I'm doing this stream and why I've decided to go down this path. If I have time here at the end of the stream, I think I might play it back. But anyway, the point is I don't know exactly how to condense anything that I'm doing, but I know that a lot of people have a lot of success posting quick little snippets to TikTok. It's hard enough to manage Twitch and YouTube, and that's all I've ever been able to manage. I've never been the guy that can be like on Twitter all the time and posting little memes that I make in my spare time. I don't have any spare time. I just kind of want to do the thing, and I don't want to have to deal with all this extra social media stuff. The goal of this isn't really to get this channel to blow up and be this huge success, as great as that would be. I just want to do the thing. I just want to get good at this thing that I'm trying to get good at. And I'm sharing it, like there's kind of a conflicting thing there where it's like, well, yeah, then why are you streaming at all if you just want to do the thing? Well, I think it's really important to connect with people, right? I know some of you are if you're not specifically in games, you're either working through a degree in software or you're into a software engineering career yourself, or maybe you're just something tangential to that, or maybe you're none of those things, but you just have an interest in this stuff. I think it is valuable to connect with people. And I also think that you will go out of your way to find things that stimulate and interest you, regardless of how niche they may be. You'll just kind of arrive in that place. You'll be guided by your own curiosity. So I think if this new approach that I'm trying to take to how I handle what I do on the internet, if it's genuine enough for its own sake, it'll attract people who are equally curious about these things and want to learn and want to share their experiences and hopefully help me. There's a ton that I don't know here, and this is the best resource. Casey's series is the best resource I've found. Everything else kind of targets different things. Like there's tons of resources for learning Unreal Engine, right? But there's really only one resource like this which teaches you how to build, Unreal Engine. Not Unreal Engine specifically, right? But the idea of it. Yeah, me on TikTok, I've never been able to get to that place. Seeing a little bit of what actually goes into game dev is wild. It definitely is insane to me. I've been writing code professionally for 7 years, and it's still, I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose, to quote one of my old bosses, whenever I... even going back through this old stuff that I've already seen. I've already programmed through the initial platform layer stuff of Handmade Hero, and it's still breaking my brain, but I want to get good at it. I want to better myself. I want to be the best programmer I can be, and so it's worth it to me. It's a simple thing for me, for sure. I like coding. I enjoyed your stream yesterday. I'm working out and listening to this for fun. Good for you, Crids. Good to hear from you, too. everybody, get in your workouts. It's good for you. Get physically active, even if it's just going on a walk. Like I said in that video I posted, I try to work out every day because it's just so essential to my ability to think clearly through what it is I need to do for the rest of my day. So anyway, what was I doing? Yeah, so this hot code reloading business. Now I'm passing in the game prefix so that this proc knows that you're going to look for the names here, these two right here, update and render and get sound samples. You're going to look for them, but they're going to have this prefix in front of them, right? It's just, I don't want to have to write out that prefix here because it's kind of redundant. Like, we already know it's my game code. I'm just going to call it off of the game object, right? So there's no point in me adding those prefixes in there. So if we go back over here, so that's what that is. Give it the prefix. This is the member I want the actual library to be assigned to, and now I can actually do the hot code reloading correctly. See, now we've got this red, or I guess magenta and blue gradient, and I can go into my game code and I can change it so that I can get the green slotted in the right spot, and it just appears. And also I can do this. This was the whole point right here. Not only will it hot reload, but I can loop it. I brought my controller today, so I can do a little loop-de-loop here. And that is not working the way it's supposed to either. There's something else messed up about that. It's supposed to replay the whole game state, but clearly there is something else messed up about this. And I'm guessing it has to do with the copy file proc that I have. Why is that not? Yeah, see, it just keeps going down. It's supposed to set that little square back up here. So there's something else that's broken, but I at least fixed one part of it. I'm gonna have to go back and fix that other thing now too. What a bummer. What are we doing, Toby? We are watching me make mistakes and fail. That's what we are watching me do. But you know what? I was gonna start a new day here. Because I actually want to move forward, but the fact that this is broken and I don't have enough time to get through a whole nother day, and I don't want to start writing a bunch more code on top of, clearly I've got some other bug here going on, so I'm just going to try and figure this out on stream, because I'm not going to have any more time before I start up again tomorrow. So I don't want to kick this can down the road. I'm going to try and fix this on stream, and if I can't, then I can't. But it is what it is. So I'm just gonna rearrange some things over here, and we'll see, man. I don't understand why. So what have I actually changed here? I didn't change anything. I just reformatted that copy file procedure. Oh. Yeah, no, that's right. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this. I had this. Oh man, this is really painful having to have this much. This code is just so blown up right now. I'm used to having it be so much smaller. Let's see. Oh, I'm in the game code. Let's go back to the platform layer and get rid of that. So now I'm just loading the game code once instead of locking it twice and putting it in the wrong place. Basically, the game would try and rebuild, and then it would try and recopy the library over to then start the hot code reloading, and that part is working now, but before it was trying to get the new version of the DLL. Well, the compiler was trying to compile it, and then it would fail. But even once I fixed that, it was storing it in the wrong place, so I had this locked version of the library, this lock on the library that was hanging around, and now this is just way simpler and better, and it'll just work. But that does not explain why the looping is not working. So if I go into this proc where we start recording the input, It really is a bit of a I don't know what else to call it, a mindfuck, trying to do this and talk through it on a stream. I have a renewed appreciation for the fact that he was able to do this for 660 something days, because there's just something about it that it's like how when I'm having a meeting, like if I'm working on some code for like an hour and then I have to have a meeting that lasts an hour, getting back into writing code after that hour-long meeting is over is really tough, because you have to put your brain back into that place of where you were within solving the problem. And I mean, it's like being interrupted. I always go back to this analogy, but it's like being interrupted in the middle of like trying to beat a tough boss on a game. It's like, Mom, no, let me beat this. I'm so close to beating this boss. It's going to take me the rest of the night if I don't beat this boss now. Don't make me eat my dinner. Anyway. So, I don't even think... I'm not using that copy file procedure anywhere else, am I? Yeah, it's just in this place. So that has nothing to do with it. But nothing else has changed. I guess I just never tested this on Windows either. And so, I don't know... I don't think this was ever working. You know, I made sure that it compiled and built and ran, but I didn't actually test any of the stuff that was most recent, which was those were the last few things that he works on, is the live code editing and having it loop the playback. So the input is working. We know that much. If I go up here, I'm just gonna look at this again. So if we go over here, in fact, I don't need to, like, this isn't about hot code reloading at this point. I just need the playback to work. So we start recording. I go up, I go to the side, I go down, and then I start playing it back. The input is working, but the game state is not, right? Because it just keeps going after a pause, because it's pausing once it gets to the end of the input playback, and then it just keeps playing that input. So we're feeding the same we're feeding the recorded input into the same game state over and over, and you can see him starting to work off the screen because the game state just isn't changing. Like, the position of my little square there is not resetting back to the original place where it was in the game state. So we know the input playback and recording is working, we just don't have the state working properly. And I wonder why that is. I'm guessing well, if I actually look at those files, if I look at the game state files, that looks to be about the right size. We allocate a gig of memory for the game state and just shove it into this file. So it's not like it's not writing some state. Is that the right state though? It's is the state that's being stored incorrect, or are we simply failing to read the state back? If we look over here, yeah, so this is working because that is for the input. But either we're failing on this write, we're failing to write the game state out, or we're failing to read it back in. Isn't streaming great for debugging? It's painful, but it's a learning process. I have to learn how to stream and program at the same time, which, you know, I didn't think it would be easy, but I also didn't expect something that was working just fine on my MacBook to blow up in my face. So I'm just like, oh, I feel like an idiot. Why didn't I make sure this was working before I started streaming? But this is what it's all about, right? It's about, you know, confronting things head on and learning how to do better. And correcting my mistakes. So this is where we're at. Hey, Gordorokos, if I'm pronouncing that right. You can make the frame follow the Y of the cursor and make it as small as you want. I'm not positive I follow. You mean for helping debug this mess? I think I understand the problem pretty well. I just don't... I thought I was in a good spot to like wrap up that last day, and I'm afraid to start messing with a bunch of code. But it kind of seems like I have no choice to just start doing a bunch of stuff here. And maybe I should have just taken a day to figure out how to do debugging, using an actual debugger to step through the code in Odin, because I know it's possible with VS Code. I just don't want to have to deal with VS Code. I don't know, maybe I'll make a point of doing that at some point in the near future. There's all sorts of things that I could be doing, particularly if I get the cease and desist order from Casey, because he for some reason finds out that I'm restreaming his series. Again, I have no idea what to make of what he would make of what I'm doing here. It feels really weird, but I don't know. I'm enjoying myself. So I'm just gonna throw in a log here. Again, I wish I could just step through it and see where is it failing. But it seems, well, yeah, write the game memory block out to the replay buffer. It seems like the write is working because all that data is there. You got this big state file. So maybe it makes sense. Maybe it makes more sense to start where we're reading here. And we're gonna say failed to read game state. And I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of where else is a good place to throw in a little faux log message here. It's definitely recording the input right and ending it and recycling it over and over correctly. So this is the only thing that makes sense to me. It's just weird because I didn't change anything with this and it was working fine. I feel like a crazy person. And this sort of thing happens to me all the time, both at my day job and working on my startup. I'll make changes and that seemingly have nothing to do with the feature, and then when I come back to deal with that feature, something's broken inexplicably. It's because I need to get good. I don't know. Let's try this. I'm gonna build, and we're gonna run, and we're just gonna. Yeah, it's saying it failed to read game state, right? Because it failed. Error does not equal none. So I want to print that error. Duh. Let me build, run, and we'll try again. Unfortunately, I can't hot code reload my game state reloading. Unknown. What the hell? How can the error be unknown? Did I close this handle? You normally have the code smaller, but I assume you made it bigger for stream, so make it smaller, but only record only a part of your screen and have that recording follow your cursor. I see what you're saying. That could be a good idea. I mean, I can't figure that out live because then the whole stream would become about me figuring out how to do that. But that's a good idea. Is that how other programming streamers do it? I have no idea. I just always assumed that they had their code like big up in front of their face and just dealt with the pain. You have no idea. Yeah, I mean, it's something worth considering, I think. I think you're onto something there. There could be potential there. So it's telling me I can't read out this game state. After I've written it. So why on earth, dude? I just, this is really weird because I didn't even make changes. Like that other bug, when I saw what I had done and the mistake I had made, it was like, duh, but I haven't made any changes to this since I got it working the first time. And that error is, like, how can that be an error? Unknown means that an error has occurred but cannot be categorized. Why? Why does that even exist? It's just inexplicable. We don't know. That is not helpful. It means something's got to be wrong with the hand, like maybe the handle is messed up. I mean, the state is there. We know that much. But is the handle closing itself for some reason? What happens if I just add this in here so I can look at the handle itself? Like, is this... So what this does, right, we are reading off of this file handle, or the stream handle, technically, I guess, and we're going to read everything that we get in from that into this game memory block. And I'm starting at the very beginning of the file. That's what the 0 means. I'm going to the very beginning of the file, and I'm going to take all of that data, and I'm going to fill this game memory block with it. There might be something going on here that, for whatever reason, it wasn't a problem when I got it working on Mac OS, but I essentially did something wrong, and I got the right outcome in spite of the fact that I did something wrong, right? And I guess what I mean by that is something about the fact that I'm trying to have the memory layout be, I don't even know how to articulate this correctly without sounding like a complete fool. So I feel like I should just give up. Somebody who knows what they're doing would be able to articulate what it is I think is going on here. But I don't even know if that's actually the issue. But basically the memory layout of the game state in the file that I'm trying to read back into this memory block, I might have been assuming that it would just neatly go back in there. But nothing has changed, right? Like, when I'm not changing the game memory layout, so I don't know why it would have a problem with that. It seems more likely that I'm doing something stupid with the handle somehow to the file. Oh man, how much time do I have? I don't know. I'll just go until I can't go no more. And if I can't figure it out, then, you know, I'll eventually tomorrow I'll come back and I'll explain what it was I did wrong the same way I did with the hot code reloading. But for now, we'll just try and sit with this and think through it. Yeah, so let's just run this and we'll do another loop. We're seeking from 0. Wait a minute. Okay. Yeah, so that's baked into the... I don't even understand, actually. Stream, the procedure... The stream has a procedure member. Is what that's telling me? and the readat call is calling that procedure underneath the hood inside of this readat proc. Let's just look at it and see. So these are all the bytes that I want to read the memory into, and I want to start at the offset. And we haven't read anything yet, so that default parameter is fine. Length of P, if length of byte, yeah, I mean the length of this is not, oh I see, if it's already read in the length of P, then you could get an EOF or nil in return. This is a funky one, man. If it was literally any other error, I would have more to go off of, but unknown, that is a bizarre thing that I don't know what to do with. Unexpected EOF means that the EOF was encountered in the middle of reading a fixed size block of data. Blah 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 blah. I could just try seeking to the beginning and then reading. Maybe I'll do that because I just don't know what else to do to even begin to make progress on something like this. So I want to go to the beginning of the handle, if I can remember how to do that. No, of course, you won't let me go to it unless I've pretended to write it correctly. So the offset, we want to go to 0. And we're gonna seek from 0, or should that be nil? I really don't know. Why can't I type? Whoops. That is an enum. Enum, what do you prefer? You decide. It's up to you. So, yeah, here I can say failed to seek to beginning of replay buffer. And then we'll just print that error. And then here, I will comment this out. And we'll just read. No need to read at any particular offset. We'll just see what happens. Like, it could be that it's failing because the write is nasty. It's doing something is bad about the way I'm doing this write. But it seems really straightforward. You write at the beginning of that file all of the game memory state, all the game state, and then you just read it back in when you want to play it back. Like, it doesn't seem like there's anything fancy going on there. At least unknown tells us it's not the other errors. Yeah, at least I know it's not hitting an end of file. Thank goodness. I know something that it's not. And I guess, you know, out of all the millions of possibilities that it couldn't be, it's good to rule one of those out, right? I can't even with this shit. This is funky, man. I thought I had this nailed when I kept on going and looking through this code over and over when I first did this, and it worked. It seemed fine. I didn't see a problem with it, but I didn't bother to run it on Windows, so there you go. I did not even rebuild this. In fact, do I care? I keep running it in another tab because that's how you do the hot reloading. I can't get into my code when I run it inside of my editor, but I don't care. I'm just doing the loot stuff. So failed to read game state. So it's not failing to seek. It's going to the beginning of the buffer just fine. but whether I'm trying to read out a particular offset or I'm trying to read just wherever the current offset of the stream is, it doesn't matter. And that kind of makes sense because this is doing the same thing as all of this is doing. Right? It just kind of seems pointless. I just wanted to make sure that my understanding of that was correct, because if not, then clearly I've messed something up here by making this call the way I'm making it. So I'm thinking maybe like file permissions or something. Like that A, I think, means I can, it's all, I have all the permissions. Is that what that means? I guess this looks like it's about 1/10 of a gig too high. Almost like it's writing in. No, that doesn't make sense. How many gigs is this? If I plug that number in, 2 gigabytes. 1.14 gigabytes. $1.21 gigawatts. I really do not know. It's so straightforward. Like, how how could this happen? We don't have to close or flush the stream after writing. Maybe. I mean, I really don't know for sure. Do I stream at 5 every day? Roughly, Crids. I'm gonna try to be streaming around the same time, 2 p.m. ish Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, but it might change some days depending on how my work schedule is going. Yeah, I really don't know. That number just looks kind of off to me, 1.14. I mean, that's what I thought, but it should just be the 1 gig, right? So over here we go through. Oh, yeah, something about permissions. It could be that I'm doing this wrong, because I remember reading somewhere that dealing with file permissions on Windows could be a bit of a bear. Windows mode is unused on Windows, but is needed on Nix. This is for making a directory. I feel like there was, yeah, there's only that one reference to that. I feel like there was something somewhere in here where it was dependent on the OS you were running on that dictated whether you could do what you wanted to do with the file. Like, do I not have read permissions? Have I not added the correct? But wouldn't it give me that error, a correct error saying that you don't have read permissions? Is there like a permissions thing here? Invalid whence, offset, negative read, negative write, negative count. What are these? Does this mean, is this saying that negative you can't read this, negative you can't write this, or negative you can't count it? Or is, no, this is probably saying that you're trying to read negative bytes, which you can't do. Like if I just say what is it, read write. I didn't have to do this. I just used these same exact flags on Darwin, and I used these, I should say, on Darwin, and it worked fine. But I wonder if it doesn't matter on Darwin for whatever reason, but on Windows you need to throw it in. Because, I mean, this makes sense, right? We're saying we can read and write, and we can create a file, and we can truncate this file, and those are the flags we want to use when we open the handle to the replay buffer. It's just a file, and we're getting a stream from the handle to that file. But if we don't set it up to read from it, you know, so maybe it was like I was getting a false positive on Darwin, right? Is that what that is? I'm gonna try it and we'll see. That was it. Feels good. It feels good to figure that out on stream. I'm not a complete moron. I can do it. I can program sometimes and do the thing that I wanted to do. Hey there, Plushie. Thanks for stopping by. It's going good. I just figured out the source of this bug that I had. Really obvious in hindsight. I wasn't giving the right permissions to the procedure call in the form of these flags here. And again, for some reason, it would let me read them out. It would let me read from the handle just fine without this flag here, without saying that I'm allowed to read here when I open it. It works on Darwin, so I can't complain too much because by and large, I haven't had issues, partially because I haven't been writing on both Windows and Mac, you know. But doing it on both, I can see where, okay, now it's making sense, because I've seen a lot of people in the Odin Discord complain and say that this OS... Mighty, can you stop licking your butt, please? I've seen a lot of them in that Discord, like the core maintainers and contributors to the Odin programming language, including the creator himself. He complains about how he thinks this... Why did I do that? This package here, right? The OS package for working with various operating systems in Odin. He thinks it was poorly designed and all this stuff, and I'm over here using it, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I mean, it seems all right to me. But, you know, I'm just a lowly web dev, so what do I know? So that feels good. I feel good about that. That could not have gone... That could have gone a little bit better. It would have been better if I didn't have the bug at all, right? Right? But we got it all working exactly the way it's supposed to work now, and all because I did not give it the right permissions. And basically what that is, right? You got to take an operating systems course now to catch up to where I've just gotten to with this stream. But your operating system can start processes, right? The kernel in your operating system starts processes, and they do things, and then when they're done doing those things, either because they failed, they succeeded, or you're the user using it, like your browser is a process, right? And you close your browser, and the process dies until you want to start a new browser, then a new browser process comes along. Well, each of those processes has various permissions to do different things with your machine. And that's why you're always being asked, you know, for instance, like when you download a new app on your phone and that app has you uploading photos or videos or whatever to then share with whoever the hell you're trying to share these photos and videos with, it asks you, can I have permission to look at these photos? Can I have permission to read these photos and then write them out to my server in my database and then show that photo that I read from your phone and wrote out to my database? Can I then show that to the rest of the world? That is what's happening, right? When you're doing that with your TikToks or whatever. You think that would have been a known error? Yeah, I agree. Maybe that's what they'll fix, because they're working on a new operating systems package, and they're calling it OS 2. I don't want to have to write that 2 in front of all of my operating systems procedure calls. So maybe like you can just import it. I mean, I think if I try to import it, it might just let me. It does not exist. Never mind. Maybe I don't have the latest. Maybe it's on a different branch of the Odin language. Maybe it's. Maybe maybe they've added it into the main branch recently, the nightly branch, right? Whoops, sorry. Didn't mean to bump your ears. Maybe, whatever it is, I can't get at it, but like, you should be able to, once it's available, just import it like that, right? And then you can use this updated OS wrapper for, you know, doing stuff on Windows, Mac, Linux, whatever. But they said that they don't, when I read what they have to say in the Discord, they say don't do that unless you're actually working on it. I would aspire to help them build this better OS package, but I am nowhere near on that level. So let's take a look at the differences we have here in main now, and I can push this code out and be happy that I solved a bug on stream and didn't have to spend, you know, 2 hours looking at the problem and trying to figure it out. So we have that changed to our flags. Now we can actually read from the handle on Windows, even though it let us do it on Darwin just fine. I changed the position of my window when it opens a new game, and I've cleaned up this stuff so I'm not breaking my hot code reloading, reformatting, good to go. This is how I do it, by the way. A lot of people, I don't actually know how common it is to do git changes in a UI. Like I don't know if there's a survey out there. I've never bothered to look. If you're doing, how many people use like a UI to look at their source control versus just using the CLI. I know a lot of people have different opinions about that sort of thing. I don't really care. I just use what I know, and I do everything through a CLI. I try to stay away from, you know, different. It's not that I couldn't learn a UI if I wanted to, right? I just don't want to have like 50 different windows open on my machine. I just want to have it all be in one thing, and I know how to talk to the machine and make it do the things I want it to do. I just gotta, you know, learn how that CLI behaves and like what are all the commands. And even if I don't know the commands, I can just go, you know, git help, and it tells me everything I need to know. I just have to read. Reading is such an important skill. I can't tell you just how valuable it is to know how to read and know when to read, because I would not have spent like an hour or two this morning figuring out if I can type correctly. Learning how to type correctly is important too, I'll have you know. What is it? Load. Is it what is it? It's something symbols. Initialize symbols. If I had just bothered to read this procedure comment here, this top level comment, I would have saved 2 hours of my life. But I can't get that time back, but I am reaffirmed of the value of reading, of bothering to read. So anyway, so let's finally prove that this all works the way that I think it works. So we bring up our game here, and you can see that. I have to make sure. And I can start a loop. Our square is over here, and we go down, we go to the side, we jump, we keep going to the side, we go up. I wave my little cursor rectangle around, and then I start looping. That's all correct. The input resets and the game state resets. Now I can properly show off the code reloading, right? Because we have this loop playing, and let's, you know, say I had some different game changes that I wanted to make, like the color of something or the gravity of something or whatever. I can't do that here because it really isn't much game to edit, but I can change the color. I can sure as heck change the color, and it works, and it happens instantaneously. Oh my gosh, it took me like 5 times as long to do something that Casey did, you know, in 1/5 the amount of time. So doesn't that feel great? But you know what? I learned something. I learned that you should always make sure that you're using the permissions that you need. You should always get consent from your operating system to do the things that you need to do with your machine. I don't really have that much more time here. I wanted to start another day of Handmade Hero, but it's not going to happen. So I'm just going to save day 27 for tomorrow. As someone entirely new to coding, what am I looking at? You are looking at some code in my editor that is part of this game that I'm starting to work on alongside the creator of this series, Casey Muratori. He started this series called Handmade Hero. The whole premise is to build games from scratch. He started it 10 years ago. And at this point, the series is on hiatus, but there's so much information in there. And I, as somebody who programs for a living, I've always been kind of enamored with games programming. I said this earlier in the stream. In fact, because I have a little bit of time here before I gotta go take care of the kids, I might be able to bring up this video that I was just watching earlier today, and it perfectly sums up why I'm doing this on stream, why I'm trying to do this on stream. I don't know how, I don't know if it's the right way yet. I don't know if it's the right thing to be streaming yet, especially if Casey just doesn't want people, you know, if he doesn't want Handmade Hero in its current form to be propagated, then that's entirely his prerogative, and maybe he replaces the whole series. Maybe he continues it. That's another thing that says on the website that he might continue it if he discovers the right way to move forward. But anyway, so to answer your question, long answer to your question is that I'm trying to sorry about that. Let me mute this tab until I find the video I'm looking for. So yeah, I'm trying to learn how to build a game. I'm trying to learn how to do games programming, and that's what you're looking at here on the screen. Why didn't the game... Yeah, did I close the game? I must have. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to see if I can bring this up. Here, I'll mute this, and then I'll bring this up, and I'll see if I can find this little clip before I wrap up here. I can't even remember. Yeah, I think it was in here somewhere. I haven't even finished this video yet, but it was just weird timing, because this perfectly described why I'm so interested in games programming and why I want to learn it as deeply as I hope to learn it someday. Was listening to this conversation that these guys were having. Oh, it actually just threw them right where Casey normally would be. So if I go over here, except now I'm way up here. So I need to duplicate this. Hold on, bear with me. Bear with me, y'all. Can I just copy this? No, that's not what I wanted. How do I copy a whole scene? Is that not a thing? Oh, here we go, duplicate. I'll just call this the YouTube tab. What am I missing here? So many people on screen. Yeah, this is a little hard to wrap your brain around. Yeah, because I'm blocking somebody else, and I'm in between him here. Where's my cursor? Can you see my cursor? Can you not see my... Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay. So I'm blocking this guy right here. Right, I got to fix that. And then I'm in between him and this guy. And then this dude is over here talking. So I'll get into this in a second. I have to rearrange myself on this. Yeah, here we go. So if I bring myself over here. I think this is fine. As someone who's watched it for at least 11 years, I'm glad to see you thriving. As someone trying to get into game coding, thank you for explaining and sharing. Yeah, I mean, I'm really not a games programmer yet. I aim to be. That's why I'm doing these streams now. It's going to be a long and arduous process, but there's something that I find motivating about watching people better themselves, that it motivates me to learn and become better. And that's what this guy over here does a lot of the time on his stream. If you're here, you're probably a lot more familiar with me than you are with him, but he is one of the bigger programming channels on YouTube called the Primogen. And I might as well just actually, here we go. Link it so I don't make you guys do any more work than you need to do. So he has actually a bunch of different channels, I think, but this is his main one. And actually, that's not even the right one. Forget that. Can I delete that? No, I'll just link the other one. It's so overwhelming to... Oh, no, wait. That is right, isn't it? Is that not right? I'm losing my mind over here. Yeah, no, that is not the right one. Okay. Hold on. So what this guy does, the Primogen, is he covers a lot of programming-related news, and also just the state of like the industry of software and software's effects in the world. Like, so if you're just an average, ordinary person, everyday person who has no idea about the software industry, you still probably would have heard about the CrowdStrike thing that happened a few months back. I think I was on paternity leave with our second son when that happened, so I was unplugged from everything when that went down. But when it happened, he covered some of the news on that stuff, right? More so from the technical side. He's always got like a technical spin on the stuff that he's portraying things through, because there's a whole niche of people out there who are programmers like me that, you know, don't necessarily want to go out of their way to find this information themselves, and I am one of those people. Not everything that he covers is interesting to me. Like, sometimes you'll have a video about a language that I just don't care about, but a lot of the times I just like watching, especially, so he seems really in his element when he's having people relevant to the industry on his channel. And this guy right here, he's known by his name DHH, which is some Danish name. I mean, his first name might be Daniel, but the rest of it is something like that. I couldn't pronounce it even if I had it in front of me, but he's known by his handle is DHH. And then this guy up here just streams a lot with the Primogen, and he is just a prolific programmer in his own right. He's done a lot of open source work, I think. I'm pretty sure. I know in this video he at least says that he contributes to the same editor that I use quite a bit. And then this guy down here, he worked for Netflix, and that's about all I know as far as his claim to fame goes. But also he's got this big YouTube channel, right? So anyway, these guys are talking about a bunch of different stuff in this video, but this guy in particular, DHH, something to note about him is he invented the Rails framework for the Ruby programming language. Now, something that I found really interesting when I was watching this back was hearing them talk about Rails. Mostly it's DHH here going on a huge rant about how he thought programming was such a pain in the ass to learn when he was younger, and then when he got to a point where he discovered Ruby, and he quickly found himself loving how expressive the language was, and it was so expressive to the point where he decided to make a whole web framework with it that would make it easy to develop web applications. And I had that exact same experience that he had when I started learning how to write Ruby on Rails applications like 7 years ago. I haven't been doing this either as long as any of these guys on the screen, but I've been doing it long enough to know where, well, in particular, that experience that DHH had, where learning Ruby made it really fun to program. I went through that exact identical thing where it unlocked all of this potential. Like I started to discover all these things that I could do. I was learning all, like, when you're stuck in the really low level stuff, it's hard because when you're learning C and you're learning about operating systems and you're learning about threads and you're like, yeah, like when do I get to, like, put a panda on somebody's head on Snapchat? Like, when do I get to do the cool shit? It's both cool. They're both cool things, right? But when I learned how to do the website stuff, I was so attracted to the potential of what I could do by getting good at web programming that all the low-level stuff just kind of got put to the wayside. I didn't touch Handmade Hero again for years. And then when I went full circle and I got fatigued on web programming, not because of Ruby and Rails in particular, but I think I just stopped growing, right? Like, I stopped learning new things. I had kind of done as much as I ever cared to learn with Ruby and Rails because I just don't have a passion. I don't really have that passion for building websites. I'm decent enough at it, but I've always been chasing that experience that he talks about here, where he says that feeling of, like, programming is fun. I want to program. It feels good to be creative and solve problems and be productive. And the more productive you are, the better you feel. So you're chasing that as somebody who does this for a living. You're always chasing that. Like, how can I make it feel better to do the work that I do? Nobody wants to work with suboptimal tools, right? Like, there's a reason why we use heavy equipment to dig trenches now, and we don't just sit there for months at a time digging it with a shovel, right? You want to have the best tool for the job. And programmers, what we like to do a lot of times, we're always chasing the tool, right, that's going to make things easier for us. But I think it has led to a bunch of other problems that are really difficult to unpack, and I'm not going to try and unpack that here, but where you've got basically the wrong abstraction to solve the problem that you need to solve. So I'll play this clip in a second, but I wanted to catch up with the chat a little bit here. You should make some horrible education games they made us take home in first grade for Ollie and Levi. I remember there was this a game for PC, and it was like a hedgehog game where you had to, like, count the hedgehogs and, like, do arithmetic with the hedgehogs. And if you got the answer wrong, the hedgehog would make a really sad sound at you, like, oh, you're an idiot, you didn't add 2 + 2 correctly. And, like, for some reason that sound is stuck in my head. If somebody showed me the game, I'll be like, yeah, that's it. Do I have a recommended language? Use whatever language is fun to use, I think, is what I would say. It depends on what you're trying to do. So you got to figure out what it is you want to do. And once you know what you want to do, then the answer to the language question is going to fall out of that. Like, I wanted to learn games programming, and so I was looking at a bunch of different languages for the past year. I looked at C and C++ and kind of working with Unreal, and that didn't really appeal to me. I've been kind of spoiled by how easy something like Ruby, for instance, or the language that I primarily use at my startup called Elixir, those languages make it really easy to do a lot with little code. And there's also just the sheer complexity. It's not that C and C++ can't be not C in particular, but C++ specifically. It's not that C++ can't be concise. It's just that language has had so much going on for so long. Like, I just don't even want to start jumping into it without any sort of goal in mind, because then I'm going to be feeling like I'm fighting the language. I have a goal in mind. I just don't want to feel like I'm fighting the language to get to where I want to go. And that's the intuition I got from the idea of moving forward with C++. So I was looking at other stuff. I looked at Rust. That's a big one that a lot of people are trying to build game engines with right now. And it's actually got a lot more traction in other circles. Like, people are trying to use Rust in web dev a lot, and they're using it for a lot of back-end stuff. Whenever I look for Rust jobs, I pretty much only see crypto-related stuff, so I can't really speak to anything about that language beyond that. I just know that I tried it, and I felt too dumb to use Rust, so I just kind of moved on from there. I tried Zig, and I was writing that for a long time, like 6 to 8 months. This past year, I've messed with Zig a lot, And then I just came across Odin, and Odin has made it so easy that like I'm getting that same feeling again using Odin that I got back when I started learning Ruby, to where it just made it so fun to write code that I just wanted to keep writing code. And I kind of got addicted to that, to that amount of fun that I would get. Much in the same way, like I'll use this analogy over and over again, much the same way that like a really fun video game just hooks you. When you feel really good about that tool you're using, the language, then you're off to the races. But anyways, that's how I would break it down for you is, what do you want to build? What is the thing that you're interested in building? Learn, if you can tell me what it is that you want to build, like if it's games, you could look at Odin. In fact, maybe I failed to link this guy's channel, but I'll probably just, I might as well add him to my channel description, because I'm going to bounce people over to him. I'm not trying to be super educational with this stream, if you haven't already been able to tell for yourself. I'm just trying to have fun and learn stuff that interests me. But this guy's channel is a little bit more educational, and it's specifically using Odin and a library called Raylib, which is actually vendored into the Odin programming language, to make it really easy to just go off and start making games, right? Like you can easily get a 2D game going, and he has a bunch of tutorials and examples of how to do that on his channel. So that's what I would say. If you're interested in games, that's a good place to start. But there's all other kinds of places you could start. You could download the Unreal Engine, right? And you could start following Unreal Engine tutorials on YouTube. There's tons of that. It all depends on what you want to do. That'll inform the tool that you're going to use. Oregon Trail, although it wasn't really educational, it was fun. I guess I never really played Oregon Trail. Dode, in case I didn't say hi to you earlier, thanks for stopping in. All right, so I'm gonna finally play this little clip here. But again, this conversation is exactly why I'm going down the games programming route at this point. As hard as it is to try and shift gears career-wise, even if I never become a games programmer professionally, all the things that I'm going to learn are only going to make me all around better at what I do. It's going to make me better to be able to contribute to my startup. It's going to make me better at contributing to my day job, right? So here we go. Hopefully I found the right time in this video here. And of course I left the tab muted. Hold on. There we go. And I still can't hear it. What the hell's going on? Oh, I unmuted the wrong tab. That's always great.
So I think about a year ago or something, I took some time off, and I was like, do you know what, that dream about games programming, maybe I was just too young, maybe I'm so much smarter now. And I sat down like, let's start with something simple. And I picked up like Commodore 64 assembler code. Like there's actually a great community, people making new Commodore 64 games. I'm like, that's gotta be the simplest possible thing. Here we're emulating literally a CPU with 1 megahertz. One!
It's totally a thing, by the way, what he's talking about. I know a lot of people get into like the hobby of games programming by going exactly this road that he's talking about. I personally have not spent any time looking at that, particular, using was it Commodore 64? Like that's just kind of over my head, but I've heard of people going that road and having a lot of fun with it.
Not 2, not 3, 1 megahertz. So how hard can it be? I mean, I could almost probably keep up with that CPU if I was running real fast, right? Like how many instructions per second can you execute with 1 fucking megahertz? So I sit down and I start like, all right, crack the knuckles. Let's get going here. I'm going to do some game programming. And I lasted about fucking 45 minutes until I'm like, yeah, oh shit, this is why. Yeah, this is not me. I cannot do that thing. And you know what it reminded me about? So I talk about race cars, and I really like cars, right? I like driving and like all this stuff. And then I thought, I've multiple times thought, well, maybe boats. Maybe boats are also fun. Like there's the ocean. I like the ocean. I like looking at the ocean. And every fucking single time I go out in a boat, it takes about 15 minutes before I go, yeah, I'm not into boats. Like I like the image of boats. I like the idea of wind in your hair and salt water in your face kind of thing. But that's just not me. I want to get back to shore. And that's what I felt when I went into this Commodore 64 tutorial. I'm just like, yeah, I got to get back to shore. Like, I got to get some Ruby into these fucking fingers again, because this isn't me. I can't do the MOV, the thing, the XORs, all the stuff.
I'm surprised you didn't try out something like Dragon Ruby. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a game engine in Ruby, so you might want to check that one out. That might be a little bit.
Yeah. Do you know what, though? I think it's not the syntax. That's not my problem. My problem is the actual domain, right? And a lot of it is about its collision detection, it's math, it's things, and it's like, yeah, that's just not. I mean, I willfully flunked my high school math.
It's so. The math actually excites me, as you know, to those of you that hate doing math and hate having to think about math. I don't want to think about math, you types out there. There is something about me that makes me demented to where I love solving a tough math problem. And one of the things, and I mentioned this in the video I posted the other day, but one of the things that was so satisfying about going back and brushing up on all the math from high school that I had forgotten, and then applying myself to place into Calculus 1, was it reminded me of like when I was really small, when I was really like 5 or 6 years old. I was doing so well in first grade math that they punted me up to second grade. And I remember that feeling of like, oh no, I don't belong here. And the other kids are looking at me funny because they're like, what's this first grader doing here? He's so good at math. He thinks he's so good at math that he can hang out with us. And I just remember feeling very insecure about it. So I like dumbed down the math, and I never placed higher in math after that. And in general, like I kind of rediscovered 5-year-old me's just like, you know, obsession with getting better at math. It's really weird to think about. And I know my mom, of course my mom is going to pump me up, but she used to tell me the story of how like my kindergarten teacher would come up to her and be like, your kid, he's counting to 100. And it might have been younger than kindergarten. And I have no idea. I'm going to learn here soon enough how long it takes a kid to learn how to count to 100 as Oliver gets older. But anyways, big tangent.
Final year, because at the beginning of the year, I remember getting the first assignment and I went like, this is too much fucking work. Like, I got other things I want to do with my life. I can't do this. So I made a deal with a buddy in my class, like, hey, can I just copy your homework the entire year? It's fine. I'll just introduce some bugs in it so it doesn't look too obvious. And I just did that. And I arrived at the final point where we had to take the exam. And I was like, do you know what? I could probably wing it. You only need 26% correct to not get an F, at least in my school. I was like, that's got to be possible. And I just realized, no, it's not fucking possible. Math is very unforgiving. You don't fucking know it, you can't do it. There's not like, oh, I'm going to figure it out in the exam room here. Like, I just, integral equations here. They're just going to come to me through divine intervention. No, they're not. And then I learned, you know what? That's not true of all domains. I went to my exam in English. I'm originally from Denmark, and I went to my exam in Danish. And the Danish one is the best one. So I walk in, and you draw your question, right? Like, this is what you're going to get examined on. And I draw fucking, I don't know, middle-aged poetry or something. And I go like, I don't know fucking anything about this. I don't remember anything about it at all. I walk into the exam room. You've got 20 minutes to prepare. I open this book, and there's like a checklist of like the 5 factors you should look at. Oh, the magic. Anyway, whatever, right? Then I walk into the fucking exam room, and I just start like bullshitting at 200 miles an hour. Like, so fast they didn't even have a chance to interject a question. And there's only 15 minutes of examination. And as you might have realized by now, I could fucking talk for 15 minutes without letting anyone get another word in. And I'm like, boom, A+. Boom. I was like, I got to find a way to commercialize this aspect of what I'm good at. Not the fucking math part. Now a lot of people go like, oh, that makes sense. That's why Ruby on Rails is so fucking slow. And like, yes, to some degree, yes. But also to some degrees not, because by the time Ruby on Rails got off the ground, I did happen to attract enough people into the big tent of this who actually did like math, right? And who didn't fucking flunk their high school thing because they thought it was too much work. And they made it better. And I think this is what's so wonderful about open source. You can show up and you go like, I am good at these 2 things. Do anyone want to trade? I can make these parts, and then you make the other parts, and then we put our parts together, and it's more than the sum. That's really nice. That's really great. Ruby on Rails is as good as it is, as fast as it is, used in as many high-profile places as it is, because literally like 7,000 people contributed code to the code base. I wasn't going to do all that shit on my own. I mean, I was going to make the to-do list work on my own, but I wasn't going to make Shopify do 1 million requests a second on my own, right? That needed some of the math folks to come in and assist.
Yeah, speaking of open source, something that I really read.
I think I must have overshot the place where he says specifically what I thought he was about to say. Maybe it's over here. It might have been just before.
Into it, but I don't see like functions and data separate. So that helped me too. Just object-oriented programming, high-level programming languages like Ruby, and then information technology. What were we creating? For some reason, I don't know why. Like, why do these things happen? I just really like CRUD. Like, I like dealing with a database. Like, often it sounds disparaging. Oh, you're just making another fucking to-do list. Yeah, that's the internet. The internet is just a fucking collection of people making to-do lists. That is CRUD apps, right?
I love how animated he gets. I've never really watched. I might have seen one other clip with this guy in my whole life, and then this video pops up, and I'm just like, I had no idea that he was so hand wavy. I can get like that sometimes when I'm really passionate about something, and then he's just swearing like in every other sentence is just hilarious to me.
Most everything on the internet is some fucking database getting inserts, updates, writes, and deletes. That's what it is. Let's just embrace it with joy.
That's what I've tried to do for so long. That's been my career up to this point, is CRUD. Getting really good at CRUD. Real good at...
And go like, yes, that's what I do. I fucking hammer on a database all day long. I shape it into little blocks, and it can make virtually everything that exists on the internet. That's pretty damn incredible. I mean, it's not games programming. I kind of wish I was a games programmer. That is significantly more rock and roll than making another to-do app. I will accept that. But hey, you gotta work with the blessings you've got. And that's the blessing I got. Object-oriented programming at a high level in Ruby. Okay, that's my cards.
That's it right there. That is why I started this channel, right? I wanted to be rock and roll. I always wanted to be rock and roll. I started a band in high school because I wanted to be rock and roll. I want to be a games programmer because that's rock and roll. That's really what it comes down to. All right, now that it took me way too long to get to that point that I wanted to show you, thanks for hanging out, everybody. No stream issues this time. You know, now that I've said that, the stream is going to drop right at the end here. But we had a solid day. I got this this bug. I discovered a bug and I fixed it in the same stream, and that feels good. My first bug solved live, right? But yeah, thanks again for hanging out, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. If not, I'll see you around some other time. Thanks for the stream, Mr. Rockstar. You are welcome, dude. I did it just for you.